Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and today we're going to talk about the Ezra Miller situation and how this affects the overall DCEU. Now, I just want to start off by saying Ezra needs help, and they should seek help and have all the opportunities to get help, get redemption, all that stuff. What I'm going to talk about right now, regardless of the allegations, are what the DC, how this is going to affect the DCEU. Now, what I think, so Warner has three options. So I want to start off. Number one is to release the movie and hedge their bets and hope it doesn't bomb, which if they release it in theaters, it's going to bomb because guess what? This is the one time where I think a movie boycott will happen. Next, they could put it on HBO Max, which that's the most likely option. Just dump it on HBO Max and then say we're rebooting. Everything's done. We're rebooting. So, or they could just pull the movie entirely. But here's the issue with that, even though I think that's the best option at this point. Because if they pull the movie, they're losing a $200 million investment. And Zaslav really wants to make money from this acquisition. So there is that issue there. But so let me see here. What the reason why I think pulling it would be the best option is because if they release it, it looks like they're trying to profit off of what's going on with Ezra Miller. And that's not exactly a good look for the company. Well, let me put it this way. Either way, no matter what the company does, there's going to be backlash. They are in a public relations vice, if you will. So that's a huge issue there. And the thing is that a report already came out that Ezra's out. I believe the deadline indicated that Warner said that they don't have any plans to work with Ezra Miller in the future. No matter if any more allegations come up, which I think that's a good first step. But first off, I think Warner has to make a statement and actually acknowledge the allegations because right now it looks like they're not doing anything. And really it looks complicit, really, because if these allegations are true and someone gets hurt, it's partly Warner Brothers' fault because guess what? They enabled Ezra Miller repeatedly by not doing anything. When they choked out when they choked someone out a couple of years ago, they didn't do. Warner didn't do anything. When they allegedly kidnapped someone that haven't done anything. The point is, Warner really right now has a history of not doing anything in spite of clear allegations or not investigating. When you take the Johnny Depp situation, they instantly fired him. So what Warner has to do is at least acknowledge it. Just say, we're looking into it. We acknowledge the allegations and we are launching an independent investigation into it. So there you go. That's all they have to do. But they won't. Which I get it. If they acknowledge the allegations now, it looks like, well, why did you enable him from the very beginning? That's going to look really bad. So in other words, on that point, so let's examine the two most likely options. Number one is just dump it on HBO Max, which that's honestly the best option because you put it on there, hope it does moderately well, and then just say we're not working with Ezra Miller ever again. There you go, done. That's a good option, and you can still try to make money off that investment. So that's an option. And honestly, that is the most likely option because the movie's done. I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime. I've never seen a movie get completely pulled from release after it's done. In terms of after the filming is done, all that stuff, they already have a significant money investment invested into this film. So the other option is to pull the movie. Now, here's the issue with pulling the movie, particularly for the DCEU. The Flash is supposed to like have this monumental effect on the entire DCEU. So it's to reboot everything, establish a new timeline. Let's say they decide to pull it. Let's say that's the option that they go with. And Warner goes with. What do they do with like Batgirl and Aquaman? All these movies are supposed to take place after the Flash. What they would probably end up doing is institute hard reshoots. Because here's the thing, they can't bring in Michael Keaton because he's established as this universe's Batman for some reason after the Flash, even though Batgirl's coming up before the Flash, so it really makes no sense. And supposedly Keaton is in Aquaman 2. So that gives an issue there. It's like, what do you do? Because if you, well, with Aquaman, supposedly he's only in there for a couple of scenes. You could just edit those out or reshoot those with a different actor and be done. In terms of Batgirl, you could just cut out Batman, but that seems weird. And plus, here's the thing with Batgirl, they're going to have to cram a lot into that series or movie. I think it's a movie in order to do the origin of Batgirl and all that stuff. And I wonder if they're going to touch on Oracle a little bit. I don't know what they're going to do. But see, that's the not because ultimately, if they pull it, that is the most costly situation, not just for the Flash movie, because they'll be flushing that money down the toilet, but also they'll have to invest more in reshooting movies. And honestly, it's a really tough situation Warner has in. Now you may ask, Jared, what do you think is the best option? What I think is the best option is, first off, I 100% agree with them recasting Ezra and Amber. Just get them out. Then call up Zach. Yes, I'm going to bring this into the Snyderverse and say, okay, so while we figure this out, can you make your movies? You'll have total creative freedom. Bring in whoever you want, except for Ezra Miller and Amber Heard. And then there you go. He does the Snyderverse stuff. And obviously they would recast Ezra Miller, or what they could do, and what honestly I would do would be less jarring on the audience, is just bring in Wally West. Just say, oh, Barry had to take care of some things, and he appointed Barry as his replacement on the Justice League. Then there you go. You have Wally West. So you could do that. That's what I would do. And then use the Snyderverse as a delaying tactic. In other words, say, this is how we keep getting DCEU content out that has a plan and has a defined end date. And by that end date, we'll hopefully have a plan on what we want to do. That's what I would do if I were Warner Brothers, because they do have this totally planned out delaying tactic that they can use. Now, in terms of what they will do, honestly, the most likely option, like I said before, is that they're going to dump it on HBO Max and then reboot and say, we're done with this. In other words, what I would do is I think they're going to do is really throw out the plan that they had after Flash. Like, in other words, make Flash the end of the DCEU and then start over. That's where I think is their best option to do this, so they can avoid all that, avoid all the drama and everything that has turned out to be hurting the DCEU. That's it. And plus, that way, if they reboot, they can easily recast people because the universe is over. The funny thing is that they're not. The interesting part is that they're not taking advantage of this opportunity to stick it to Marvel, because Marvel is having all these issues where their content hasn't been like as like world renowned as it normally was. Now the problem they're running, but the problem is that the DCEU still hasn't gotten a single plan. That's why they needed like a Kevin Feige or something like that. Anyway, that's not a topic for this episode. It's a topic for another episode. Now, in terms of, or I've heard a very good option that actually would work, so they can release the movie. You edit out Ezra to the bare minimum. In other words, cut out everything you absolutely can cut out and shoot more scenes with Keaton and make it a Batman Flashpoint movie. That would actually be really good and really cool. That would actually be a fantastic option, because that way you don't have to scrap the movie. You can completely minimize Ezra's role. And then you can, because let's face it, most people are excited for The Flash because Michael Keaton is coming back as Batman. That's it. That is really at this point the only reason why people are moderately interested in seeing it. Me, it's just because I'm interested to, yeah, and me, it's Michael Keaton, but also Batfleck. Now, and that is actually the best option they could go with here, because that way they could still release it in theaters, and they'll still take a hit because Ezra Miller's still in this movie to some degree. But if they make it a Michael Keaton Batman movie, that would actually, I think, not the words are probably not loosen, but maybe like lessen the sort of outrage that would come out from this movie. That's actually, so I would honestly say that's the best option that they could go with, because that way you don't have to throw out Andy Muschie's movie. You can still do Sasha Calle's debut as Supergirl, which I think she's going to do really well. So another thing I would do, reshoot the ending so it's not like Supergirl's a new Superman or something like that, which really, according to the reshoots, to the most recent screening like summary, they don't have a scene where like Barry is talking to Arthur and Arthur's like, so Supergirl used to be Superman. In other words, they took out that part so they could still establish that Superman exists in this world. So that's why I think at least they did that. So Cavill still exists. I'm just wondering what they're going to do with Henry Cavill, even though he wants to come back as Superman. And I think at this point that Zaslav recognizes that, say what you want about the Snyderverse, but mostly everyone likes Henry Cavill as Superman. So I think that's the next thing that's going to come back. So in terms of moving forward, to summarize what I talked about, I'm still going to go on for this. Honestly, the best option is to make this a Flashpoint Batman movie. So honestly, it would be pretty cool if you have, oh my gosh, what they could do is make Michael Keaton Thomas Wayne Batman and make an actual Flashpoint Batman movie. That would be cool. And it could also sort of like bring interest into the Flashpoint Beyond comic that's being written by Jeff Johns. Ooh, I should be in charge of DC. I have all these fantastic ideas. So that's what I would say is the best option. Just recut the whole thing, minimize Ezra's role like to the wazoo, like up the yin yang, and then just make it a Michael Keaton Batman movie. You're good to go. People will come see that. So now that I talked for about 15 minutes on that, I want to move on to how the Snyderverse can continue despite all this drama. Now, there are a couple different options. Number one being the recast. And actually, when you think about it, it's actually good that the Snyderverse has not had any work done on it since the cut came out. Because of this, because now it's easier for Zack to either replace Ezra, in other words, just establish that Barry left and Wally's now the Flash. There you go. And then you can just recast Amber and just leave it at that. So that's actually really an interesting option. And that's actually serendipity, if I may say so myself. Or they could just do it as a comic. And that was talked about after the cut came out, that Zack Snyder was talking to Jim Lee about continuing his universe as a comic book. And we know that would sell well, because look what happened when Zack plugged Final Crisis. Even though that story, we covered it like a couple episodes ago, like I'd say about 10 or so episodes ago, and I still don't understand what the heck was going on with that storyline. My point is, if you do it as a comic book, you really don't have to worry about the actors, and you don't have to worry about a budget. It just depends on who's the artist and what they can draw. Like if you can get Jason Fabok or Jim Lee on this book and Zack Snyder writing, you have a dream team. If you even do Greg Capullo, any one of those guys would do an amazing job drawing the Snyderverse. And then obviously Zack Snyder writing, and then you could do the other stuff. You could have an initiative, just give Zack his whole his own comic imprint, and then guess what? The Snyderverse continues as a comic book with the Batman series written by Ben Affleck. That'd be super cool. and like all the projects that we wanted, we can make them comic books. So at least they see the light of day in that way. The story continues in that manner. And once again, that's honestly the cheapest option and the option that gets us the most bang for our buck, because we get everything the way the directors want it. And then guess what? Make it a Black Label. Black Label is perfect for this. Now, in terms of recasting, I would recast Dylan O'Brien as the Flash, because I think he'd be fantastic as it. And then obviously Emilia Clarke as Mara. There's no one else that I would really pick as Mara. That would be my big recast for Mara and Ezra Miller. Now, in light of the DCEU in general, it's a mess. What would so you may be wondering, Jared, what would you do to manage the DCEU? Now, if I can't do the Snyderverse, because I talked about that ad nauseum on the show, for right now, I'm going to address what I would do, essentially, that doesn't involve restoring the Snyderverse, kind of like a thought experiment. So if I can't restore the Snyderverse and the Flash movie has to come out, let the Flash movie come out and then end your universe. That's it. Just say we're done with this iteration of the DCEU. Then reboot. And then now, which movie would I reboot on? You could do any of the Trinity. You could also just, instead of doing origin movies, because everyone knows the origin movies of most of these characters, just start it as these characters are superheroes. Like start with like a Superman movie where it's established that he's Superman, Batman movie where he's Batman, Wonder Woman where she's Wonder Woman, and so on and so forth. And then just have that build toward a Justice League movie. Now, what I think, the one valid criticism that I have, that I see, and it's not necessarily Zack Snyder's fault, it's really Warner Bros. Management, is that they have to build toward the team movie. I think Zack did fantastic for what he was told to do, because he was told, get to the team movie now. So that's why it went Superman, Batman versus Superman, Justice League. So I would establish the Trinity first. They have to be the first to have the three movies, because ultimately the Justice League is based upon them. Then I would have like maybe an Aquaman movie. No, actually, what I would do is in each of these movies, they recruit the other few heroes, and then you establish those characters, and then you build toward a Justice League. And honestly, instead of doing Darkseid for the villain, because that's the obvious choice for a Justice League movie, I would honestly you could do Maxwell Lord, except a comic accurate Maxwell Lord. I'm looking at you, Patty Jenkins. So you could do OMAC. That would be a good Justice League level threat to bring the team together. I'm not doing Starro, since James Gunn already did that. Honestly, at this point, I would use, I'm looking at my comic collection to see who I would use for, I wouldn't use the Anti-Monitor, because that's basically a Darkseid level threat. So I wouldn't use that. Honestly, what I would use for a Justice League threat, I wouldn't use the Legion of Doom, because then you have to establish those villains too. So I would use, honestly, Despero, or actually, I would essentially use the White Martian invasion. That's how you bring in Martian Manhunter. And the lineup of my movie would be Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, for obvious reasons. Would I use Aquaman? Probably. Yeah, I would use Aquaman, because if Jason Momoa still wants to come in, you can come in. Jason Momoa, Green Lantern. Except would I use I would use Hal Jordan, honestly. Hal Jordan, Jensen Ackles as Hal Jordan, because I think he'd do fantastic. Wally West is the Flash, and Martian Manhunter and Hawkgirl. There you go. That way you have your piece in the classic DCEU fans and the new fans and the other fans. And then I would establish Cyborg is like a hero more operating in the shadows, because of how technologically advanced our society is. You can really leverage. He doesn't have to be out there saving people. And then we have a movie, in the Cyborg movie, he comes more into his own as a superhero and then joins the Justice League. So that's how I would build up. Now, next, it would essentially be, and then so that would be the Justice League movie, the White Martians invading. Then it's like they would have their sequel movies. In other words, I would kind of model it after the MCU, but well, honestly, no, I would model after the MCU. That's what I would do. And you have to have one dude that's creating the plan. You can't have all of these executives dipping their toes in and trying to modify the plan, because that's how the DCEU got to this point. because in addition to studios freaking out over nothing and like pulling the plug prematurely on plans, what the Warner Brothers executives did too much is that what they should have done. And here's the thing, and this is my big like criticism of Warner Brothers and the DCEU. So they were trying so hard to mimic Marvel, but they didn't mimic the one thing that made Marvel successful. Because what made Marvel successful is that they established Marvel Studios and put Kevin Feige as the head of that and said, you direct the story of the MCU. You make sure everything's lined up with the continuity and so forth. That's what they need. And that's one of the reasons why I have faith in Zaslav's leadership, because he's going to do that. He's establishing the dude that's going to lead the DCEU. He still hasn't named a person, although I have a few people in mind that I think would be very interesting. You guys drop in the comments who you think would be good to lead the DC movies. So that's really what they need. And they need to stick with their top characters. In other words, there shouldn't have been a Wonder Twins movie. A Superman movie should be regular. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Honestly, I see now why the MCU came out with Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man movies, because it was like those are their main characters. They have to stick to these. They can't allow like what's been going on. Even Zaslav was upset about this, that they put Superman. The Superman movie hasn't come out in close to 10 years. Why is that? Superman is the superhero that started your company. I kind of think about it, there hasn't even been a Batman movie, live action Batman movie since I think Nolan's Batman movies. Yeah, Nolan. So what are you doing here? Wonder Woman's had 2. Actually, Wonder Woman's had 1. I don't acknowledge 2. But my point is, your top characters deserve the movies. You can give like some characters Disney Plus, HBO Max series. That's it. You really have faith in those characters. But no, you shouldn't be giving all these C and D tier characters movies in the hopes that they'll get popular. Because ultimately, so far Peacemaker's gotten, actually no, because Peacemaker really hasn't gotten that popular, because guess what? You heard about the show and it died down. Honestly, what they really should do is save those characters for short HBO Max series to see if there's interest. And then if there's interest, then you give them a movie. It shouldn't be the other way around. And ultimately, this is the other issue, and this gets into the Snyderverse stuff. When Warner Brothers hires a director to make a movie, ultimately they should say, make your movie. If you don't like your creative there are they have to have some input on the story, but don't like completely sabotage the movie like they did with Snyder, or even don't alienate your directors like Nolan, because it's like these are the talent that are bringing an audience to your content and what are you doing? So that's really where I'm going to go with that, how I would direct the DCEU, because ultimately everything here is able to be course corrected. And honestly, if they pulled Flash, what they could just do is reboot then. I don't think they would cancel it, but they would just say these projects have to have these reshoots to line up, and then you're good to go. Cut out Michael Keaton, which would be unfortunate, but that would be the way to make it line up, because you can't. Or you could just say Batgirl takes place in the Keaton verse, in the Burton verse essentially, and then cut Keaton out of Aquaman. That would be the best option. Or I was going to say, or replace him with Batfleck, but unless that comes, then I don't think Affleck's going to come in charge. He might under this new leadership. So there's always hope for that. But ultimately, that's what I would do. Essentially, that's how I would fix. Essentially, if I had to keep what we have right now, that's how I would fix the DCEU. Now, moving on to some more positive topics. Let's see. Honestly, let's talk about. I'm trying to see. There was one other thing I want to talk about. So I'm going to actually talk about Ms. Marvel for a little bit. Now, I've been very vocal on this podcast, and I'm not a fan of Ms. Marvel. Completely not a fan of Ms. Marvel. The character. So I was walking into the show, remember, saying I'm going to give it 100% I'm going to approach this show with an open mind. Boy, am I happy I did, because this show is actually really good. Because they have the visuals on the screen that look like she's like imagining everything, the paper art. There's a YouTube channel. They sort of make the powers more like, I guess, more tolerable, because it's like instead of like stretchy powers, because you know they're going to bring in Reed, so they can't exactly have two people with the same powers. So they're going to bring in Reed, and so they make it so like hard like constructs. And I definitely like it, and the VFX actually look really good. But the point is that I don't find her character insufferable, which I did in the Avengers game because she complained a lot. And I did find her annoying in the comics. For some reason, this is the second time the MCU has done this. They take a character that is insufferable in the comics and in other mediums and make them better. Part of it is that you have to cast a likable actress. And I talked about this on the Phoenix Press's stream, shout out. But it's like they cast Haley Steinfeld to play Kate Bishop, and then they sort of change her character so she's more humble and more trying to learn instead of saying I'm the best. People liked it. Ms. Marvel, they make her less annoying. People like it. And honestly, I could see them changing the comics to reflect the MCU character, and ultimately I think that'd be really cool and it'd be really good, and I'd love to see that. I may even get into the comics, into the Ms. Marvel comics. We'll see what happens there. But the show is really good. Characters are great. Family dynamic is fantastic. The side characters are great. Everything is good. Everything is really, really good, and I'm excited for episode 3. So that's what I'm going to talk about with Ms. Marvel. In terms of what I want to talk about next, let's see. So I wanted to talk about, well, more about, let's talk about general comic book stuff. So recently, I made a trip to a new local comic book store, and I picked up some interesting things. First, so I got my first issue of Fathom by Michael Turner. So I found that I definitely wanted to check this book out as soon as I saw it. I got more of Jim Lee's X-Men, which I enjoyed because you guys know I'm a big Jim Lee fan. And then in terms of trades, I got some new trades. I got Justice by Alex Ross. It's more Alex Ross art in a new storyline where the Justice League are systematically taken apart. See, it's just more Alex Ross painted art. I'm trying to find a place on my desk to put this. I finally got Green Lantern by Jeff Johns, book 2. So I can continue reading the Jeff Johns Green Lantern run. And then when I finish this trade, we're going to talk, we'll cover the Green Lantern, the Jeff Johns Green Lantern run when that happens. Then I got Superman Panic in the Sky by various writers. And it's like a Brainiac invading. This is during a time when there was no Justice League. Hang on, I'm trying to make sure my trade collection doesn't fall over. That would suck. Then I got Batman Long Halloween in honor of the late Tim Sale. For some reason, I hadn't read this book, so I plan on reading it. This is the return of Steve Rogers. In other words, after Civil War, he died, and this is the issue where he came back to life and became Captain America. Put this here. Then I have book 2 of Joss Whedon's X-Men run, which I know Joss Whedon, but still I enjoyed the run. Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman, which this is one of the best Wonder Woman runs of all time. And then Batman Last Night on Earth by Snyder and Capullo. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for like a long time. And so far it's really good. It's establishing like this is a future world where like the earth is like shattered and destroyed. But it starts off with basically making the reader believe that everything that happened to Batman was in his head. He's actually crazy. And he killed his parents, and all the villains were actually his doctors at Arkham Asylum. So I really like that. And then they show the old Batsuit, which is more like a straitjacket. And then yes, the Joker's head is in a jar. He meets Wonder Woman, and she has a mohawk, and then she explains everything that happened with like the world falling apart and all that. And then he obviously gets his bat suit, his rebirth bat suit that has the purple and the interior cape, and then the yellow outline on the bat symbol. That's still one of my favorite bat suits because I like how the yellow accents the bat signal, the bat emblem, and makes it pop. In terms of, those are the new comics that I got. Thinking of redoing The Office a little bit. In terms of content for the show, so we're keeping to the regular schedule of a Monday general video, and we're probably going to talk about. I'm still coming up with the plot for the next video, but it's coming out. Indie Wednesday, we're going to cover probably Berserker from Keanu Reeves. I know some people put some suggestions in the thing. I have to pick up those trades, and then we'll cover those. In terms of next Under Two Capes episode, we're going to talk about probably the best Batman stories. That's what I think we're going to talk about. So in terms of what I want to talk about for the rest of this episode, let's talk about what projects we're excited for. Because I saw the trailer for Black Adam. It looks pretty cool. I like how we're bringing in like the JSA. Let's grab some water. And then I like how the JSA looks. I like how Hawkman looks. I like how Black Adam is really going into that whole little anti-hero bend where he kills people. I also dig how it looks like he's gonna be fighting the JSA. And I'm wondering when this is going to take place in the timeline, or if it's even taking place in this timeline, because it'd be interesting if maybe this is a backdoor Snyder movie, a Snyderverse movie. Because actually what's kind of funny is The Rock has supposedly has complete creative control over this movie. So actually it's his, so actually he can really do whatever he wants with it. So that'd be interesting if he puts in black suit Superman. That'd be dope. But in other words, it looks like a fantastic movie, and I'm really excited for it. In terms of other DC movies, we still haven't gotten a Flash trailer, so I really can't tell you if I'm excited for that. Although, still, again, with the Flash. But and then in terms of if I'm excited for, let's see, what other movies? Really not a lot of DC movies coming out. Aquaman 2. I still have to see more of a trailer for that before I'm really pumped for that. Because we haven't really gotten a trailer. We got a little bit of a teaser at Fandom. But it's not enough to get me really hyped for it. In terms of Marvel properties, like I said, I'm really enjoying Ms. Marvel. Thor 4 looks pretty good. Even if I'm not a big fan of Taika Waititi's little take on Thor. But it's going to be interesting. I want to see where they go with the story. I like how they're bringing in Gore, because I think that's a fantastic villain for Thor. And in terms of, let's see, what else is coming out? Well, let me pull up the roadmap for the MCU. MCU movies this year. Oh yeah, Black Panther's coming out, and then we have so it's Thor and Black Panther are going to be the movie that's coming out this week, and I'm interested to see how they handle the Chadwick Boseman thing, because it'll be interesting to see if they essentially I don't think they're going to bring Killmonger back to life, because that would be the stupidest option for them to do. But I feel like they'll probably put another dude as Black Panther, like M'Baku. Something. In terms of She-Hulk, okay, if they fix the CGI, it looks fantastic. So, but the story looks good. I'm just waiting to see how the CGI looks. Once that's fixed, totally fine. Because I'm a big fan of She-Hulk. Then the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. That's going to be very interesting, which is Volume 3. The story will feature the main cast and fill in the considerable time gap between 2017's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and 3. Okay. Then Ant-Man Quantumania. That's the next one. I'm talking about the recent ones. I don't know how why Ant-Man's fighting Kang the Conqueror. That's it. Oh, and then we also have Guardians of Galaxy Volume 3. And then we have the Marvels, which once again, I've been very vocal on my dislike of Brie Larson. So there is that, but I'm interested to see what they do with Monica Rambeau and Ms. Marvel. So we'll see what happens with that. X-Men 97, the revival of the X-Men animated series. I'm very happy about that. I really hope they bring back the theme song because that seems like a missed opportunity if they don't. And then Secret Invasion's coming out, which I'm excited to see how that affects the MCU because they could make all these bad characters just Skrulls. That's it. And apparently they're making an Agatha series. And then we have Armor Wars, which is going to be a Tony Stark series. There's lots of stuff to be excited for. Lots of stuff. And it's going to be a very good year to be a comic book fan. I just wish that DC would get their act together because ultimately Marvel has all this stuff coming out. Boom, 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 boom. But DC is like, okay, so what do we do? And that's been the issue since Justice League 2017 because DC has constantly been playing catch up to Marvel, which it shouldn't because DC is better than Marvel. I've said this many times, and DC has better characters, but they're not taking advantage of that, I guess, creative opportunity that they have. And that if they did that, they could easily surpass the MCU. What's interesting is that they had an option with the Snyderverse, but they sabotaged that. I will say that forever. If they had kept to the Snyderverse, eventually would have gotten to the Zack Snyder's Justice League point, which everyone liked. So at this point, it only makes sense that if they need competition with the MCU, they would go with someone that has a plan. Because here's the thing, and then Sarnoff published that article, but before she was fired, that said, oh, we have a plan and everything. And then it turned out, it sounded to me too much like that's like that line from A Princess Bride. You keep saying that word. I don't think you know what it means. Which would be, yeah, because they obviously do not have a plan. It doesn't make sense. Anyone can tell you they're not playing with a full deck. But that's just my armchair quarterback area of this. Now, our last topic for this episode, which I think is very important to talk about, is what are they going to do after Dark Crisis? Because for those who don't know, Dark Crisis is the current crisis, and they have the Justice League being dead. Now, what I think they could do is, well, first off, I think the DC universe needs a reboot for many different reasons, chief among them to eliminate any traces of Brian Michael Bendis. Completely eliminate it. Make it so he never came to DC. Yeah, de-age John Kent. Probably not going to do that, but still, I still think the reason why they're not going to do that is because if they did that, imagine the backlash that they would get. But my point is that go back to the era, go back to Rebirth, honestly, because when Rebirth, everyone loved Rebirth. DC was surpassing Marvel in sales, and that was was partly because same time DC was doing Rebirth, Marvel was doing the All New, All Different, which everyone hated for the most part, and forced these newer characters that no one liked, and eventually the MCU had to pick up the slack. So there was that. But I mean, if they reboot it, I mean, they have the option to reboot. DC's done this many different times. This is what people don't realize, is that if they reboot it, DC can't reboot. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They do it all the time. They literally do it all the time. You can debate me if DC needs a reboot, but don't say it's not anything they've done in the past. In terms of what that new world's going to look like, I think John Kent's going to be a kid. Superman's not going to have revealed his identity like an idiot, Bendis. It's going to be, Rogozar won't exist. It won't be like he destroyed Krypton. No. Jor-El is not going to be a bad guy. We're going to make it where he died on Krypton. In other words, eliminate the Bendis stench. And then actually put someone on Wonder Woman that actually understands the character and has a solid story to tell. Because, I mean, there was like, look at the legendary Wonder Woman runs. Raka, who is Perez, definitely. Put those people, put the people that understand Wonder Woman on the Wonder Woman book and just go forward. Another thing, cool it on the Batman books because ultimately because here's the thing. Here's what DC has to realize. They're creating character inflation, as I like to call it, because ultimately what you're doing, ultimately people are going to be burnt out on Batman. And what people also realize is because if people are constantly buying Batman books, they don't have enough funds to purchase the other stuff. That's probably why Batman sells more, because they oversaturate the market with Batman books. They have to like cool it on the Batman books. Another thing they have to do is actually in the new continuity, respect continuity, because ultimately what it sounds like is that what's been going on for too long, and this was evident in the Bendis era, is that editors didn't want to tell their creatives no. And that led to stories like John Ridley's Superman, where he was violated in prison. And that led to the entire Bendis run on Superman, Tom King run on Batman. You have to be able to tell these guys, no, fix your story. I don't care if because ultimately it's going to affect how the characters are perceived, period. You essentially work for us and you're contractors, but think about it this way. If you essentially just be able to say no. Another thing is make it a meritocracy. In other words, you have to have sold books well. I've sold a lot of books. You have to demonstrate an ability to sell in order to sell to be put on Superman. In other words, I don't care how experienced you are. I don't care how you wrote, what many books you sold at Marvel. You have to start at the very bottom in DC and work your way up. There's no more like they automatically give a Bendis complete control over Superman. No, because that's what led to the Superman issues. What they also should do, don't give one writer total control over the character. In other words, what I mean is that, like, take Batman. Don't have the same writer on Detective Comics and Batman. Have two, because if someone doesn't like like Detective, they can go read Batman. If they don't like Batman, they can go read Detective. And the same thing with Superman. Because you need to give people an escape. So if they don't like what the writer is doing or the art, they can go to another one to get that same character fix. And that's the issue that they ran into with Bendis, because Bendis, he had control of Superman and action. So there's no escaping Bendis. When Bendis came, he came like a whirlwind. That's the issue there. Ultimately, that's how it fix DC. It's going to take time. Oh, also replace a lot of the leadership at DC. You can keep Jim Lee because he's a good front man. Actually have Jim Lee actually out there promoting the stuff and doing more than what he's doing now, because ultimately it looks like he's put his head in the sand. But besides that, put leadership in line that will do what I've outlined. I don't think Zaslav is going to do that. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to undo a lot of the damage that's been done to DC in the past, I'd say 8 years, 5 years, around there. But ultimately, the potential is there. And honestly, if they do the reboot, that's the easiest option for them to sort of take out those, sort of eliminate those sort of repair the damage that's been done to DC. Anyway, hope you got, I think that's a good place to leave it. Let me know what you guys thought about the books, about my thoughts on DC's reboot, about the Ezra Miller situation, DCEU. Basically, let me know your thoughts on the episodes, on on what I talked about today. Like, comment, subscribe. And let me know in the comments anything else you want me to talk about on the show, and then I will. And I will see you in the next one. Stay heroic, everyone. Bye-bye.